Given its use to describe a number of beloved movies, TV shows, novels, comic books, and games over the years, it might surprise modern sci-fi fans to learn that, when author Wilson Tucker first coined the term space opera in 1941, he meant it in a less than flattering manner. By that point, the serial radio dramas that dominated airwaves had already come to be known as soap operas, thanks to a large number of them being sponsored by various soap companies. And the term horse opera was also at the time a popular way to dismissively refer to especially formulaic Western movies. Tucker used those terms as his inspiration when, in a 1941 issue of his influential sci-fi fanzine Les Zombies, he first used the term space opera to describe what he saw at the time as a preponderance of, quote, hacky, grinding, stinking, outworn spaceship yarns, end quote. While Tucker may have meant the turn of phrase as an insult, perhaps what saved space opera from forever becoming a negative connotation was the simple fact that many sci-fi fans quite liked a lot of these stories, and were more than happy to be given more. But what exactly is it they were asking for? What is space opera? Typically, the term refers to adventure-based sci-fi stories, usually concerning intergalactic warfare and chivalric romance. Despite that romance element, some fans and critics are quick to point out what they see as an important distinction between the space opera subgenre and what is known as planetary romance sci-fi, the latter usually being preoccupied with the geography and culture of alien worlds, while space opera is heavily focused on space travel. Stories fitting this mold had already long been a fixture of sci-fi publishing, both as serialized stories in pulp publications and numerous standalone paperback novels, by the time Tucker coined the term. E. Doc Smith's 1928 novel, The Skylark of Space, is now often cited as the first great space opera. That same year, the first adventures of Philip Francis Nolan's character Buck Rogers would appear in the pulp magazine Amazing Stories and be an instant success. But it would be one of the many characters inspired by, or some would say ripped off from Buck Rogers, that would arguably come to be seen as the first truly iconic go-to example of a space opera story and character, when cartoonist Alex Raymond created the comic strip Flash Gordon in 1934. Romantic stories of space warfare would continue to dominate newsstands, comic strips, radio waves, and movie screens throughout the subsequent decades. But it wasn't until the 1960s that critics finally started to join with fans and began treating the term, and the genre it represented, with some respect, thanks in large part to the works of authors like Poul Anderson, Gordon R. Dickson, and M. John Harrison. In 1974, writer Brian Aldiss contributed to and edited an anthology titled Space Opera, which collected classic sci-fi tales of the past, including many from the 40s and 50s, and also contained stories from such well-regarded genre authors as Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury, and Philip K. Dick. This collection certainly helped bring some positive light to the phrase, but obviously, one of the biggest benefits to space opera being seen as a true, respectful commodity was the 1977 release and huge, massive success of George Lucas's Star Wars. While certainly not the first space opera movie, it quickly became the most famous, and would soon be looked at by many as the commonly recognized basic template of what a space opera is now. And it's certainly true that, at least in the world of movies, most post-Star Wars sci-fi that has been considered space opera, such as Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, The Last Starfighter, The Fifth Element, The Chronicles of Riddick, and Serenity, we're all hoping to perhaps be the next Star Wars, as unattainable a realistic goal as that might be. But it remains an alluring one. As long as there's an apparent audience for large-scale space adventure, there will be authors and filmmakers alike adding to the expansive space opera canon. Heck, even a filmmaking duo who had already and arguably left their mark on the sci-fi landscape forever, with a groundbreaking cyberpunk action thriller, wouldn't be able to resist also trying to get a taste of that Star Wars success with their own take on the space opera. The question was, following two other financial disappointments, would this particular gamble pay off, or would it become their dreaded third strike? The year is 2015, and the Wachowskis are ready to launch what they hope will be their next giant sci-fi action blockbuster franchise, with Jupiter Ascending. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I am Chris, here to talk to you about Jupiter Ascending.
Okay, I was waiting for you to yell. I was just on pins and needles, seeing is he gonna fully commit to the bit or what?
I do. Always.
Yeah. Well, if those of you who have seen this movie, all 10 of you, will probably recognize from Chris's excellent acting there that today we are talking about 2015's Jupiter Ascending, the second part of our two-part look at the Wachowskis and the Wachowskis' failed franchise starters in preparation for the continuation of their not failed franchise, quite the opposite. As we get excited and prepared for Matrix Resurrections, we decided, as we are both huge Wachowskis fans, we wanted to take a look at the two times they kind of whiffed, or at least, in terms of like what this show is about. So obviously last time we talked about Speed Racer, which failed to, start a franchise, but for those who heard the episode, we both, I think it's safe to say we liked that movie.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah, and today we'll see if that is the same with Jupiter Ascending. But these are the two films where they definitely had more planned, and they didn't quite pan out. So I think this is an interesting one to talk about. We'll see. But Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about 2015's Jupiter Ascending?
As Trev said, it is written and directed by the Wachowski siblings. Budget of $179 million. Domestically, it made $47 million. And worldwide, it made $184 million, which estimations of losses of over $100 million. So this was a quite the bomb. We'll talk about if it was critically. Well, actually, critically it was a bomb for sure. But why did this not get sequels? Well, it lost $100 million.
Yeah, and this is interesting because I think it's worth talking about. And obviously, we don't see into the future or anything. We don't have that ability unless Chris has been holding back from me and not telling me. But as of today, this is the last Wachowski's sibling movie. Even Matrix Resurrections is just Lana. Lana kind of forging ahead alone now. So obviously after this, they did do Sense8. I believe that is both of them working together. But in terms of cinema and, theatrical releases, this is the last film with them working as a duo, a team. And you wonder, is that ultimately, is the fallout of this film part of that? Or is it really just Lily kind of, moving on to different things, not being interested in film anymore? Who knows? But this is kind of it at the moment. Chris, what do you think? I mean, I know, obviously it's hard to make this prediction. Do you think we've seen the last of the Wachowskis as a duo? Do you think it is just Lana from this point forward? Or what's the vibe you get?
I think that all depends on how Resurrections goes, honestly. This one, because I think you're right. With this movie kind of shitting the bed in a lot of ways, maybe it was a moment that they needed kind of a break from cinema, obviously, and then moving on to Sense8. I've heard good things about Sense8, by the way. Have you seen that? I've never seen it.
No, that's the thing, is I've also heard good things, but I never got around to watching it, which is, it's surprising that neither of us have watched it, considering how much we like the Wachowskis, but yeah.
And it sounds as their work is, it sounds very ambitious. It sounds interesting, but it's just one thing with me, especially when it comes to series. You know me; it's hard for me to watch a show and a series, and that huge commitment of time. I like to be one and done with a movie. You know what I mean? Even though I rewatch movies ad nauseum, I like a film.
Well, and you know me, I'm particularly suspicious of Netflix series.
Yes, that
because
too.
They have a tendency to not let them finish. And as I vaguely recall, I believe that almost happened with Sense8, right? It got canceled, and then they were able to kind of come back and do like a movie or something, or like a 2 episodes to finish it. I believe it has an ending, but I think it sounds like it might be an abrupt ending. So I don't know. I mean, someday I'm sure I'll get around to it. I shouldn't say I'm sure, because who knows? But I would like to.
Yeah.
But I do think too, this is. Well, let's just jump into this, actually, because the point I'm about to make can feed into what we like to do at this beginning here, is talk about the background of this movie. So for those who don't know, Jupiter Ascending is kind of a giant space opera. It's this original property meant to start this whole new big sci-fi universe. So it seemed like it was very much in their wheelhouse. But in terms of what we were just saying about it kind of, being the film that maybe breaks them up as a duo a little bit, we should point out that this is like their third kind of big failure in a row. Right?
Yes.
Coming off of Speed Racer and then Cloud Atlas, which that at least, gets some critical acclaim, but also is not really a huge hit. And then Jupiter Ascending. So, contrast that to the highs of The Matrix and even the Matrix sequels, which I know were mixed reaction, but still did quite well. V for Vendetta, which they are essentially uncredited directors of that film, and it really is kind of a Wachowski. It's a stealth Wachowski movie that was obviously a big hit. And then you get into, they were the uncredited writers on The Invasion, which was like the modern updating of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which was terrible. I don't know if you've ever seen that, Chris. It's really, really bad. It's like the first bad Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie.
And they wrote it? I had no idea about this.
Yeah, they were the uncredited writers on that.
Wow.
But it was when it came out, that was like kind of known. It was like pretty much, it was like one of the worst kept secrets. But then Speed Racer, Cloud Atlas, and then this, and it was kind of just like it seemed like, man, they're losing their shine a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So I do think, as you said, like maybe Lily. I don't want to say she has a thinner skin than Lana. I don't know, but maybe Lily started to get a little like hurt by that, or just like, man, this keeps like not working. The things what we're trying to push out into the world, especially as you said, these are two filmmakers who wear their heart on their sleeves so much, and are all their stories are about this need for like human connection and these super optimistic stories, and to see the audiences keep rejecting them in a way. Maybe Lily was just like, nah, I'm gonna walk away from this for a bit, and maybe Alana's the one who is like, I want to keep trying. I want to keep trying to push through here.
Well, and I think too, this movie, which we'll get into, this one feels a lot more constructed. Like it's definitely a little bit more designed by even, I don't want to say committee, because they're visionaries obviously, but it definitely is a producer driven idea. Like right here in 2009, Warner Brothers president Jeff Robinov actually approached the Wachowskis and wanted them to make a brand new big sci-fi property that they could turn into a giant universe. Now, 2009, why is that year relevant, Trev? Well, that's the year of Avatar. And people like to shit on that movie, but you know what? It changed a lot of cinema at the time, for better or for worse. But 2009, the Warner Brothers looked over at Fox and was like, holy shit, they're going to have a huge franchise on their hands. 12, 14, 15 years later. But they decided, we should probably try to do our own sci-fi epic. Also, in 2015, Force Awakens was being revived. So, I mean, Star Wars was being revived. So I can understand the producerial view on it. Yeah. But also, that's again, it's the Wachowskis kind of being told to do something rather than them going to the production company this time.
Yes, exactly. So, and I think, you're dead on. I also want to throw in, besides Avatar, we also can't forget that 2008, is the beginning of the MCU.
Yes, of course.
So the studio's looking at this and saying, okay, that's blowing up. Avatar's this huge hit. Now suddenly, that really is the shift, right? This had been starting. This had obviously the move towards mostly IP and franchises began in the 90s, early 2000s, of course. But that really is the moment where Hollywood just breaks.
Yeah.
And studios decide, this is all we care about now. So you don't turn to the Wachowskis and say, hey, make us a bunch of like kind of standalone films. At this point you say, hey, you're the two that made The Matrix. Do that again.
Yeah.
Right. Bring us something that is a series. Even though, the sequels weren't what we wanted them to be, they were still successful. So can you replicate that? And can you make us maybe something even bigger? And I think you're right. There's a lot about this film that for the first time, Speed Racer and Cloud Atlas, neither of them are original properties. Obviously, Speed Racer is an adaptation of a popular show from the 60s. Cloud Atlas is the adaptation of a very critically acclaimed book. But you get the sense that those were two projects the Wachowskis were really emotionally kind of connected to, really wanted to do. We know they loved Speed Racer growing up. We know Cloud Atlas was obviously a book that meant something to them. In fact, they even worked closely with the writer, David Mitchell. So they really wanted to adapt that. And then Jupiter Ascending, it's not like this was necessarily a property they'd been thinking of since they were kids, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this is a world we've been building forever. As you just said, this was a world that they kind of quickly and hastily came up with and put together based on a studio saying, could you make something for us?
Yeah.
It almost feels, do you get the sense when you watch this and when you hear that story that after Speed Racer and Cloud Atlas, this was maybe even more like, I don't want to say like the pressure's on them, but maybe this is them trying to like make up to Warner Brothers for a little bit for those two films? Like,
oh, that's exactly what I'm getting at. Yeah, like absolutely. This is them playing nice.
Yeah.
Like, this is them being kind of quote unquote told what to do. They're going to put their stamp on it, but they're definitely playing within the studio realm with this film for sure.
Right. Yeah. So this is like, well, okay, you've supported our projects. We haven't always delivered box office wise, so here you go.
Yeah, classic, one for me, one for you kind of thing.
Yep. Except this was nothing for anybody.
No. More like Jupiter descending.
Oh, so getting that edict, they decide, because they are still the Wachowskis. This is what I do. This is why we like them, I think, or at least part of why we like them, because a studio can come to them and say, hey, give us like a brand new IP and a big sci-fi franchise that can maybe compete with the MCU, with Avatar. I don't know if they knew anything about Star Wars coming back, but they're like, give us one of those. And I think a lot of filmmakers, we know what they would create. And the Wachowskis kind of say, okay, well, we will give you 18 movies worth of story in one movie. like if they're told to come up with something, they will obviously take it quite seriously.
Yes.
So they definitely create a lot here, and that's something we will definitely talk about as we get into this. I don't know if this has too much to say about the build up to it, but maybe we should talk about some of the casting.
Sure.
And just like, because I mean, I story wise, all we have to say, we'll get more into it in the review, but they essentially come up with this idea for a space opera. They want to do a big space opera, and in particular, they want the space opera to be based around a different kind of hero, right? They say, like, this is very much going to be the main character here, the titular character is going to be a heroine, a young heroine, and they look at it and say, well, a lot of the like female heroes in sci-fi are always these like super tough, Ripley-esque women, and they want to try something different. In fact, I have a quote from here where the Wachowskis themselves describe the plot of the film as an effort to reverse the classical sci-fi trope of the hero who is emotionally withholding and strong and stoic. They wanted to make a much more emotional sci-fi film, which exactly sounds like them, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And so then that means they need to start casting. So they cast somebody, a very, very acclaimed, very famous actress, and it doesn't quite work out. Chris, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, that is Natalie Portman, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, it's just funny because this leads into the secondary casting. But Natalie Portman was originally cast as Jupiter Jones, and I think definitely after she won her Oscar for Black Swan, I think a lot of doors opened for her, more than ever before. Of course, not that Natalie Portman was ever struggling. Let's be honest here. Like she was kind of on her way up ever since. Since she was little in Leon. Yeah, so, I mean, yeah. But it is funny that kind of crashed and burned. So they looked at her co-star from Black Swan and called up Mila Kunis. So
yeah, I always wondered about that. It was like when they got the call and Natalie was like, I can't do it anymore. Did they just, was it that lazy where they're like, and then they looked at their shelf and it's like, Black Swan, let's get her. Let's get the other one.
Get the other one.
Because it's interesting, because even post Black Swan, as you said, that's interesting because they were the two leads of that film. Mm-hmm. But obviously, Portman is the one who gets the majority of the attention, gets the Oscar. Two leads of that film, but definitely very different levels of fame, right? Like,
extremely.
Mila Kunis is not quite. I don't even know why I'm hedging this. Let's just say it. She's not on the same level of fame as Natalie Portman, and she's not as kind of beloved of a personality, I don't think. I'm not saying anything personally. I'm just talking about the way they're viewed as a celebrity. So I do think that's interesting that they just went kind of directly to her. But maybe, I don't know, maybe it was a thing where Natalie Portman told them a lot of great things about her and working with her. And I will say, Mila Kunis's background kind of fits into the character as well. Definitely. I didn't really look into. Did you look like, was this already the background of the character, or was it retrofitted for once they got Mila Kunis? Do you know that or no?
I don't know. That offhand.
So we know because this character is like her family is a Russian immigrant family, and she is in the movie during the Earth sequences. She's living with this extended Russian family, and Mila Kunis was born and spent some of her life in the Ukraine. So she does kind of fit into that. But yeah, did you know that was actually the second film that Natalie Portman dropped out of with them because she was also attached to Cloud Atlas for a moment?
Oh, was she? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
sounds like after
drama.
Yeah, I was about to say after Black Swan. Were you with me in line at Comic-Con talking to somebody that worked for Marvel and said that after Natalie Portman's Oscar win, she was kind of a pain in the ass to work with? Were you with me that year?
I never heard that directly, but I believe almost everyone in the world has heard that. That's
Okay.
kind of that is kind of one of the worst kept secrets again, right? Like it was pretty much known that she was very frustrated. And to be fair, I'm trying to be fair in this. She was very frustrated in the development of Thor: The Dark World in particular, because she was the one who brought Patty Jenkins onto that.
Right.
And Patty Jenkins was obviously had those creative differences, and I think Natalie Portman was always kind of hurt by how that kind of played out. And yeah, I just had always. That's why it was kind of such a surprise that Portman returned now for this new film. Right? People really thought she was done with Marvel because of that. Because I love Natalie Portman. But
Trev, mortgages cost a lot of money.
Well, I love Natalie Portman, but it is complicated to say. There is a sense where sometimes with her you wonder. This is weird because she's done those SNL digital shorts and things. So I'm not saying she doesn't have a sense of humor. But there are times where she kind of comes across with that, like, I am very much serious artist actor person. Mm-hmm. And it's, there was this like little concern that maybe she didn't get like the fun of the Marvel universe.
Right.
And I was wondering, but it takes like a visionary filmmaker like Taika Waititi to convince her to come back, but don't get me wrong, I'm excited she's back, and I'm really looking forward to seeing her play like female Thor. I think that's awesome. So.
Same here. But would you? What are your thoughts on Mila Kunis as Jane Foster?
No thanks.
All right. Okay.
And we'll get into perhaps why. But and then so we have our leading lady locked up, but we have another important character. We have the male lead, Kane Wise, a genetically engineered soldier. So this casting makes a little bit more sense to me, especially when you look at the timeline.
Definitely.
And that is they get an actor who is, as we like to say, so hot at the moment, right? If we can be like Mugatu here. They grab Channing Tatum. Now, to put this into perspective, I don't know if this almost feels like it's already kind of forgotten, right? Because of the way his career goes. But we have to remember Channing Tatum was so on fire at this point.
Oh, yeah.
You look at, he's interesting because his career takes a bit to get going. I think, he's got a few, obviously the Step Up films, Step Up and Step Up 2 are like obvious hits. But then you look at everything else that's happening in that point, right? The early 2000s, he's doing things like Stop Loss and fighting. He's got a very, very small role in Public Enemies. G.I. Joe obviously is not the hit people expect it to be. It does okay, right? But it's not a mega hit. So it's like, people are aware of him, but other than dance movies, it doesn't really seem like he's connecting. And then he kind of seems like, he's just become one of those guys who just does those Nicholas Sparks romance films, like Dear John, right? Like, I guess maybe that'll be his thing.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we get to 2012, and we have this kind of 1-2 punch of The Vow, which does very well, which again, but that's like, he's another one of those movies where the posters all look the same. It's the two people touching their foreheads or whatever, right? But
we should make one of those for us and then make that our new cover art.
In 2012, he also does 21 Jump Street and Magic Mike.
Yeah.
And now we're off to the races, right? And so now we see a couple ways. Now he's a proven box office draw, but also this is where he becomes much more interesting, and this is where I definitely become a Channing Tatum fan, because he does what you always want these young actors to do. You can tell he makes a decision right here to say, I'm taking control of my career, and I'm going to try to work with very interesting filmmakers. I'm going to try to develop my craft. And you see him now kind of becoming like an apprentice of Steven Soderbergh, working with him a few times. You see him kind of, trying to get involved with more interesting projects like Foxcatcher. But yeah, so from 2012, we got 21 Jump Street, Magic Mike, Side Effects. Comes back for a brief moment in G.I. Joe Retaliation, whatever. One of the best cameos of all time in This Is the End.
Oh, yes.
This is my gimp. Channing, introduce yourself.
Hey, what's up, guys? Y'all cool?
It's Channing Tatum.
That's Channing Tatum, dude. What the fuck? Channing fucking Tatum. I found him wandering on the freeway. I collected him, made him my bitch. Get off my dick. I call him Channing Tate Yum.
Hardcore, man.
I got him trained good. Watch, he does tricks. Wait, shake hands. It's Channing fucking Tatum, dog.
I love him.
It's fucking G.I. Joe, dude. Fucking loves me.
Yeah. And then he gets White House Down, which also feels like perhaps an attempted franchise. I don't know. I don't know if we ever talked about that one, but that's like his big play for being a big action star. By 2014, he's also done the sequel to 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street. That's a big hit.
Which I would argue is better than the first one.
My name is Jeff. Hey, Jefe, man. Hey, tell me about that crazy adventure you guys had. Go into incredibly descriptive details of the story so we all know.
Oh, yes. It was Dora and Diego and Swiper.
Swiper?
And who was that you choked out, man? Oh, he had it coming. Who was that?
Boots.
22 Jump Street is so fucking funny. Like, they're both absolutely hilarious.
I think, to me, I can't choose. They're, like, interchangeable for me.
Oh, man. Those two films are just, like... I don't think we gotta really stress Channing's comedic timing and his charisma, because it's gonna lead into what we talk about in the movie, in this movie.
Yeah.
But, like, Channing Tatum at this point... Dude, he is top-tier comedic charm talent. Like, it is unreal when he's on screen at this point in time. Like, yes, he was a heartthrob, but now he's like a fucking actor. And somebody, you want to go see a Channing Tatum movie because you're going to have a rockin' time. So, like, I can absolutely understand, hey, let's get this guy for this movie.
Well, I think you're dead right, because that's, that like I said, that 1-2 punch of Magic Mike in 21 Jump Street.
Yeah.
I saw Magic Mike in the theater and was quite blown away by his performance. That's a movie that I think a lot of, like, especially insecure dude bros don't give a chance to, not realizing it's actually just a damn good drama, you know? I think Magic Mike XXL is the movie everyone thought Magic Mike was going to be.
Correct.
But that first one is just like this really, really well done character piece, and his acting that is just so subtle and so understated and such a great performance. But then that 21 Jump Street performance, as you just said, that was definitely a turning point where people were like, oh, this is a guy who not only is he funny, but he's in on the joke. That's the crucial thing, right? Like, because it's very easy to do that role and not be on the joke, but he is so clearly in on it. Like, he understands what the perception of him is, what people think of when they see Channing Tatum. He gets it.
One particle of unobtainium has a nuclear reaction with a flux capacitor. Carry the two, changing its atomic isotoner into a radioactive spider. Fuck you, science!
And he leans into it, and once that's unlocked, and you realize, oh man, he can do the drama, but he can also be really funny. Like, we are looking at a megastar, and it is interesting that, post Jupiter Ascending, you see he works with Tarantino in Hateful Eight. He works with the Coens in Hail Caesar. He does Logan Lucky. And then, I don't know, things kind of start slowing down, and it's actually been kind of disappointing to me to see him kind of. And I know, there was some I know he went through a divorce.
Yeah, there's personal stuff. Yeah,
there's some personal stuff, but I'm hoping we're finally gonna get a turnaround and see him come back. I know he's got a couple projects in the works right now, so it's been kind of a bummer to see him kind of vanish from the scene. But 2015, that was a casting coup, I'd say, grabbing him for this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to let's talk about. I mean, there's really two more people of note. Would you say?
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the third one being playing a space cop, Stinger Appeney, Kane Weiss's old partner in space cop stuff. Yet he's not half dog like Kane Weiss is.
No, he's half bee.
Right.
He's half honeybee.
He's half honeybee. Okay.
Yeah. Well, trust us, folks. If you haven't watched the movie yet, we're going to get into all this. I know it already sounds good.
Yeah. Sean Bean is awesome. Yes. I love Sean Bean and everything he's in. You get worried that he's going to die in everything that he shows up in. I will not tell you, listeners, what happens in this film. But... yeah, he's awesome. He should be an A-lister, and he's not, and it drives me nuts.
I'm sure he's not the first actor we've said this about. I think I can think of a few others we've talked about, but he's just one of those. He's old reliable. Right?
Yeah,
yep.
Totally.
You cast Sean Bean, and you're like, well, I don't have to worry about that part of the movie at least. Like, that's the guy who's going to come in and fucking nail every scene he's asked to. You're gonna be happy every time he's on screen. That is, you're so dead on, right? And you're right that everybody knows who Sean Bean is. He's well known enough, but that's primarily just because of the meme, right? The meme of him like dying and everything. I think that's why people know who Sean Bean is. He should be a bigger star, but I think he's got a career worth envying. And
absolutely,
yeah. And it's actually pretty. I think one of my favorite things about this movie is that he's like so high build, and that he does have such a high profile role in this, because he's very often used by Hollywood to kind of put into smaller character parts, right? You just throw him in like a little bit because it'll make the audience happy, and it's kind of cool to see him get a major character in a potential franchise starter like this.
Well, especially when he's basically Mr. Exposition for most of it, so he's very integral to the plot as B-boy. you know?
Well, and that's why you need a Sean Bean, because he is saddled with exposition.
Sean Bean.
Oh boy. As I was saying, there's not too many actors you can trust to like entertain us when they're only giving exposition dumps, and Sean Bean can pull it off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Chris.
Oh man, that was I okay. Listeners, Trev is in America. I am in Canada, and I saw his face. I saw his face.
We're not looking at each other,
No.
but the way I just made that transition, I think, spoke volumes between us.
Oh man, that was great.
Because we both know what we have to talk about now.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And that is the fourth main performance in this. Another, I guess, casting coup at the time. Let's be fair. Let's be honest. And that is as Balaam Abraxas. Abraxas? Is that how you say it?
Abraxas.
Abraxas. Okay, Balaam Abraxas. We cast. Well, we don't. The Wachowskis cast.
We would have never done it.
we would not have. But the Wachowskis decided to cast Eddie Redmayne.
Yes.
Eddie Redmayne coming off of fairly acclaimed performances in Les Mis, and I'll be honest, I like Les Mis and I like Eddie Redmayne in it. I'll give credit where credit's due. And then also coming off of The Theory of Everything, his Academy Award-winning performance as Stephen Hawking. So he's also quite hot at the moment. This is like the ascension of Eddie Redmayne, and so to get him as your main villain, I get it. I get it from a completely business perspective. I get you always grab who's hot, and even the same year this comes out, he also does The Danish Girl, which is his second nomination for Best Actor. So, and this is right. And then 2 years later, actually the very next year, he'll become the lead of the Fantastic Beasts franchise. So he's definitely still a big name. He's still hanging on. And,
I don't understand it.
It's such a, so I'm looking at his filmography now and I'm thinking, to be honest, there's a lot of stuff he started with that I didn't see, but actually, I'm a huge fan of, speaking of Sean Bean, the two of them were also in a 2010 horror movie called Black Death, which is great. I don't know if you've ever seen that, Chris, or aware of it.
No.
So that is from a filmmaker I really like named Christopher Smith. That is an awesome movie, and that is Sean Bean and Eddie Redmayne are the two. They're like these two monks who are sent to villages that have the Black Plague, that movie's awesome, and they're both really good in it. Obviously, Sean Bean's good, but Eddie Redmayne is also. And as I said, I do like him in Les Mis. So honestly, my problems with Eddie Redmayne kind of didn't start until that. I guess we're giving things away here. But that 1, 2, 3 punch of Theory of Everything, Jupiter Ascending, and Danish Girl. That's when I started to be like, oh, well, all right.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in the review, especially Jupiter Ascending, of course.
Yeah.
But
one thing I want to mention is more about the release schedule for this, if you don't mind, before us jumping into the review. So this movie was originally set to come out in July of 2014. So this was billed as a big budget blockbuster summer event. And what happens is, in April of 2014, they hold a secret screening of this film at Sundance. Of all places.
Yeah, what a terrible decision.
Really, really, really stupid. A bunch of people with, sticks up their asses, to put it lightly. But this is not the movie for them.
No.
But they held a secret screening. It was like invite only. The theater was half empty. People left before it was over. It was a disaster. So in June, right before it's supposed to come out, honestly, 1 month before it's supposed to come out, WB says we're pushing this to February of 2015. A notorious dumping ground for films. It's kind of the kiss of death to go to February. And they needed to finish like 2,000 new VFX shots and whatnot. But like I said, the kiss of death is February, and Lana Wachowski had something to say about that. The summer is built around familiarity. Many cultural critics who shape awareness for films are obsessed with sequels and derivative material. They wildly crave it. That kind of environment is hostile to originality. It only makes space for derivative material and rejects originality. I think Warner Brothers was uncomfortable with that environment. Obviously, not happy. Not happy that they didn't have faith in them. But she's not wrong. She's not wrong.
She's not wrong. I mean, we do, the whole notion of February being a dumping ground. in a post-Deadpool world that maybe is looked at a little differently.
Sure.
So Deadpool is the first one to kind of come along and be a huge hit in February. And now I think because even just since 2015, the industry has shifted so much in even just those 6 years, right? To where release dates are kind of the importance of like particular months feels a little less set in stone as it used to. You know, obviously there still is a summer movie season, but at the time as this definitely looked like it should be a summer movie. And it was more just, if it had always originally had been announced as February and it had been sold as counter programming, maybe that would be one thing. But that push and the early bad buzz, it definitely made it feel like the studio had lost faith in this film. That's what I remember about this release. I did not see this movie in the theater.
I did.
And I know you did. Okay.
Yeah.
For me, this was like immediately when it hit video, I checked it out. But I do remember that kind of being out in the ether a little bit about this. This felt like a movie that the studio had kind of given up on already by the time it came out. Do you like? Would you agree? That seemed to be the vibe as it was released.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I even looked back at my Letterboxd review for it, and a buddy of mine had commented under and saying that he was geared for the worst already. Mm-hmm. And that just told me, okay, it must have been in the ether. It must have been in the wavelengths prior. So it's funny because even the Wachowskis were like that quote already. You know, if everybody's losing faith, of course the Wachowskis now are losing faith. Mm-hmm. And even before it flopped, again, Lana says this: "We've been lucky. People at studios have been interested in our crazy, strange brand of complexity, and we've been allowed to keep making them. Will that continue? Probably not. But it was a good run."
Mm-hmm. She's right. It was a good run. So,
yeah, it was.
But yeah, and I try to like think back. I can't quite remember. I'm trying to like place myself to like of initially seeing the trailers and how excited I originally felt versus how I felt by the time it was released. But I do remember always thinking this looks like it's going to be a hard sell. Mm-hmm. Right? Like this is not. I love big, gigantic space operas. I think it's really cool when people try to make a new property. Obviously, I think you and I agree that we are kind of frustrated by how just everything is IP now.
Sure.
Previous existing IP. So, and I do love the Wachowskis. So much that speaks to how I should have been excited, and the fact that I didn't see it in the theaters does tell me that it was probably like. Not only was I hearing the bad hype, but I think even maybe the trailers, I was like, I don't know. There's some kind of disconnect here. Does that translate to how we feel about the movie? I guess we'll find out in a little bit.
You've been taught that the birthplace of the human race is Earth, but it's not.
Do you know what this will do to people when they find out the truth?
I don't think that most people would want to know the truth.
I do.
Your planet was seeded by brass axe industries roughly 100,000 years ago.
It's one of the most powerful dynasties in the universe. There are 3 primary heirs. The oldest is Belem. He's the one that controls this planet and wants you dead.
I'm telling you, I'm nobody.
You are royalty.
What about the girl?
Still alive.
Bring her to me.
When the exact same genes reappear in the exact same order, it is what you call reincarnation.
Majesty's life is going to change, if she wants it to.
I'm still the same me.
Right now, Belem owns the title to Earth. Once you claim it, the Earth will belong to you.
I will harvest that planet tomorrow before I let her take it from me.
Have you ever seen a harvest?
Never. But I've heard they feel no pain.
You should have told me the truth about why you wanted her.
That planet belongs to me.
Not anymore.
Your Majesty, I have more in common with a dog than I have with you.
I love dogs. I've always loved dogs.
Here we go.
Earth's residents are unaware that the human species and countless other planet populations were established by families of alien royalty, their purpose being harvest the resulting organisms to produce a youth serum for the elites on other planets. After the death of the matriarch of the House of Abrasax, the most powerful of the alien dynasties, her 3 children, Balaam, Kalik, and Titus, fight over who is the primary heir to Earth. Meanwhile, Jupiter Jones, an unlucky caretaker, is identified as the genetic match of the murdered alien matriarch who used to rule Earth. Genetically engineered ex-military hunter Kane Wise must now protect her from alien assassins and take her to outer space where the heirs of the Abraxas dynasty are plotting against her.
I commend you, Chris.
Thank you.
For somehow figuring out how to succinctly summarize this film.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't mind, I'll start off, Chris,
sure,
and talk about my thoughts on this. So this is my second time watching it, and so in our last episode, our listeners heard us be very, very enthusiastic and very kind of forceful in our defense of Speed Racer, talking about how we think it's kind of this unsung masterpiece, definitely underappreciated, deserving of a big following, a bigger following. You're not going to hear that from me this time. I will say, as much as I love the Wachowskis, this one, Jupiter Ascending, to me really is, for me, even their only big swing and a miss. And I will just say, I didn't really like it the first time I watched it, and I actually think I maybe liked it even less this revisit. I think it's like its faults kind of stung me a little bit more. Ooh, honeybees.
I was about to say, yeah. Sean Bean.
This is a very, very ambitious film. There are things to like here. There are definitely things that we can discuss in a moment that you have to give them credit for, and they're doing a lot of stuff that I wish more filmmakers would try to do and aim for. So I can't completely just shit on this movie. However, I will say that for me, there are 3 elements that ultimately sink this. The first being, it's too much. This is too much story for one film. This is a movie that needed to be a TV show, I think. I think this is like a good season or 2 of a potential sci-fi series put into a 2-hour movie. So that's my first issue. My second issue is a lack of sense of humor. I don't need every movie to be funny. I don't need every movie to be the MCU. We've had this discussion before. But I think this movie needed to be a little bit more self-acknowledging and a little bit campier. There are moments that are, and I like those moments, and we'll talk about that. But I think overall, it doesn't quite hit the tone it needs to justify some of the big kind of epic space opera feel they're going for. And third, and we'll certainly talk about this, I think there are a few crucial casting mistakes that really hurt this movie. So to me, that's like a hat trick of elements that unfortunately make this pretty disappointing for me.
I'm going to be echoing quite a bit, I think, this episode. Trev, you haven't seen the Eternals, right, yet? Or Eternals?
I have not, no.
Okay. So this movie is very similar to Eternals. Weirdly enough. Without getting into major spoilers, I'm just going to spoil it, just like a minor spoilers for Eternals. A lot of the plot is very similar. Ancient aliens of some sort grow planets until the population is ripe for a certain type of harvest. Tons of characters, tons of mythology, all crammed into a running time, right? Into one singular film. And both Eternals and this film crumble completely under the weight of what it's doing, of what it's trying to say, what it's trying to do. I agree. I wrote in my notes too, this needed to be a series. Same thing I've been saying about Eternals. I think Jupiter Ascending should have been a Netflix show or Hulu or whatever the fuck, wherever it's going to go. But it definitely needs room to breathe.
Yeah.
It is both, or it's equal parts over and underwritten. Mm-hmm. It's overwritten in the plot, in the mythology, but completely underwritten with every single character.
Yeah.
This is a movie that is all plot, all big backstory, like a dense series of like YA novels or something. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's one great character that populates this entire universe. And that's the issue for me, is that it's, I was very bored in this movie. I agree with you. I saw this in theaters, and then I saw it a couple days ago, and I think I checked the time. Mm-hmm. Ooh, probably 15 times.
Yeah.
And I just wanted it to be over. The first 15 minutes, I'm all into this movie. I think the first 15 minutes, and we'll get to we'll talk a little bit in a little bit about I think where the movie peaks. But it is quite the slog. It is quite the expository slog.
It's interesting because a big discussion nowadays, and I know you and I have weighed in on this in our own discussions, but a larger overriding discussion in film Twitter and just cinema discussion online and otherwise is the length of big blockbusters. Mm-hmm. And people just being so frustrated that all blockbusters nowadays are 2.5 hours. And I've always kind of been a defender saying it doesn't really bother if a movie's good, a movie's good. And I remember the 90s always being excited when a movie was that long because you felt like you were getting more for your money, So I've always kind of not understood why people are so put off by 2.5 hours. And I think that just speaks to how nowadays a lot of movies don't know how to use that time. What's interesting about this film is this movie's not ultimately really that long. This is only 2 hours and 7 minutes, and you factor in credits, we're just talking about, a little under 2 hours here. This movie feels like it's 3.5 hours. That's the issue, right? And you're exactly right. Like on this view, I kept saying to myself again, like, how long is this? How much longer do I have to go? And we're certainly going to speak how a big part of that is the structure. This is a very oddly structured film that I think speaks to, it almost feels like they created an idea in their head of a trilogy, and at some point they realized, we're not going to get to make that trilogy. Let's just cram it into this movie. Yeah. Because you have 3 kind of antagonists, right? Who all are given their moment in the film. And it seems like, you have this, the entire design of this seems like it should be 3 films, where you have 3 children in this Abraxas family. You have Balaam, Titus, and Kalik. And it's like, why isn't like this movie about Kalik, and the next one being about Titus, and the next one being about Balaam or something? Right? The fact that they're all crammed in, it's so oddly structured. We'll get into that. I'm not even. I hate to say, Chris, you're going to echo a lot of what I'm going to say. I'm not even with you on being that into it in the first 15 minutes. I think this movie actually loses me pretty quickly. I'll talk about that in a moment, but. Yeah, it's just too much. You said crumbles, and that's exactly the right word. They're biting off more than they can chew here, and it's frustrating. I think you were dead on another thing where you said it's all about like the plot. You can tell that what was really captivating to the Wachowskis with this was creating this world and this universe and all the potentiality there about this cool thing about the bureaucracy of this world and how it's all kind of political. I get a sense of like. I can picture them creating this movie and having all that stuff up on like note cards and whiteboards in their office, and then there being like this small little piece of paper off to the side that says characters, right? There's like a couple things sketched on there.
Yeah.
And what's crazy about that is let's just reiterate again what this movie's about, because this is what is mind-boggling to me. This is a great concept for a movie. A young girl who is like, her life sucks, right? She works as like with her mom. Her widowed mother, she works as a maid, right? A maid, like, and her life, she's plunging toilets, she's cleaning up people's bedrooms and kitchens. She's very, very poor. Shares an apartment with, multiple family members. Is so poor, she's actually she has to sell her own eggs just to be able to afford a telescope. And then she finds out she is the heir to Earth. She owns Earth technically.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
This is a modern fairy tale.
It is. This is a sci-fi fairy tale. This is exactly what they're aiming for, too, right? And then once she finds that out, she has to be protected by a half-human, half-dog, genetically engineered soldier. This all sounds awesome. And you tell me that plot description, and I walk away from that thinking, I'm going to love those characters. Mm-hmm. This young girl who's like a janitor and finds out she's actually the ruler of Earth, a half-man, half-dog soldier. I bet they're going to be great. And then you watch the movie and you go, oh, I can't remember anything about them.
Yeah,
so
totally.
And as you said, that's the problem here. Is the characters are just the characters are dead on arrival. So all the impressive world building can't quite make up for it. Even though it is pretty to look at, and there's some interesting stuff going on. It can't quite overcome that.
I have never seen Bound, the Wachowskis' first film.
Bound is awesome. Yeah.
So I mean, and I will have to trust you on that because I would say this is definitely their worst film. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because of the reasons that I was alluding to before. This is not a personal movie. This is not built by them. It wasn't ignited by them. Yeah, yes, they put in the work of about the world and whatnot, and fine. Okay, like good job. But this one feels so cold and so empty compared to the heart and soul they put into everything else. And like, can we just talk about Mila Kunis right now? Because we have to. Because a movie like this, like you just said, it's a fairy tale about a young girl that becomes the fucking queen of Earth. Okay, I need to bow down to that person. I need to be so invested in her journey. And oh boy, Mila Kunis has the same dumb, doe-eyed, fucking baffling, confused look for 2 hours. And she never emotes. She is never weirded out. She never exclaims about what's going on. She's talking to a half dog person with hover boots, and she's just like, okay. Mm-hmm. And you really need to sell me on Jupiter Jones. What a great name, by the way, for a character. Jupiter Jones. She needs to be peak fucking character. And nope, not even close.
Maybe the best thing about this movie are the character names.
Yeah,
we should just kind of keep tossing them out because there's some great ones in here. Chicanery Knight, Maximilian Jones, Famulus, Gemma Chatterjee. There's so many great names in this. Yeah, I was kind of thinking about this getting in preparation for this episode, Chris. I was actually kind of concerned, or not concerned, but like you and I talk about a lot how we don't like to talk too bad about actors. We don't like to shit on actors very much. Yeah. And I was thinking
which is funny because I think we do it every episode.
I know. And we always caveat it that way, right? And the thing is, I was definitely coming to this one like, well, there's kind of no way around it this time because this is definitely a bad lead performance. Mm-hmm. And you do picture like, think of someone as dynamic as Natalie Portman in this role. And I hate to say it, but I'm not anti Mila Kunis necessarily, but there are some people that just aren't movie stars. I think Mila Kunis is maybe a TV actress or has to be in a certain kind of film. This seems like a little bit out of her range, and maybe that's unfair. Maybe this is just an off performance for her. Maybe she wasn't being well directed. She was the second choice. Who knows? All I can say is to the point you were just making, because this is a different kind of lead character, because they bypass the whole she becomes a badass and becomes a warrior. They don't do that. This is instead a film that is sold entirely on her emotional arc. This is supposed to be about watching her realize that she means so much more than this like crappy life she has. And you're supposed to see her kind of come to this realization and then find the inner strength in her to stand up to all these people and on a bureaucratic level make decisions that benefit humanity. Right? That's the ultimate. That's where this movie is heading. Is her big kind of character decision at the end is to speak up and say, I'm going to do what I'm going to accept my role as the leader of Earth, and I'm just going to simply like take charge of it, but I'll still go back to Earth and be a normal person, right? And we don't even realize she's our queen, right? And boy, that is just not played at all, like on screen. You're exactly right. Like once she's thrown in this world, she does not act with the sense of wonder that the early goings of this film needs. And then she maintains this like flat line throughout, and it's really unfortunate. I think that when I was saying earlier about like the poor casting, she's definitely, she's one of the biggest issues here. Let's say that it's really hard to overcome that.
Yeah, like there's a scene where she sees Greys, which is the alien, the Area 51 cliche looking aliens, and no big deal.
Nope.
Yeah. First time she's ever seen him. No big deal.
Yep. Yeah.
And she like Trev said, she sells her eggs at one point to for some money for another side plot that doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't matter. But like she's in the doctor's office, and then the doctors inexplicably change to the Greys again, the little aliens, and once again, no real reaction. I know she's kind of drugged at that point, but even still, she definitely seems like she's on a green screen. You know what I mean? And I know she probably wasn't because there's a lot of practical effects, which we'll get into, but she feels like she was plucked out of the, episode 1 or Star Wars prequels or something like that type of filmmaking. All on a green screen set, nobody around them, nothing real. But for this movie, everything was real around her. So like that, there's almost no excuse at this point that they can say, well, there was nobody to act against. Hell, she's with Channing Tatum. Mm-hmm. And he can't even get a good performance out of her.
Yeah, Sean Bean,
Can we go back? I will return to the performance, but because I don't want to forget this, because you brought up the subplot about her selling the eggs and like, so let's just briefly talk about that, because that also shows how. Okay. I think this is a movie that also gets a little confused sometimes with storytelling, or like I said, I don't know, maybe there was like a longer version of this, and I definitely, this is the kind of movie you watch and you think, boy, I bet a lot was cut from this in like the production process or even pre-production, right? But this is like a bigger screenplay and it got whittled down. And this is like a great example of that. So to reiterate, at this point early in the film, Jupiter Jones has no perception of this whole intergalactic. Nobody on Earth does, right? We don't understand that we've been designed to be a planet that is meant to like harvest people. So she's just going about her life, and as we said, she needs money to buy this telescope because she wants to have this connection to her late father, who is obsessed with the stars and everything. So she wants to get a telescope just like he had. And so the only way she can afford to do that is by selling her eggs, which only one of her, I guess, I'm not sure if there's a brother or a cousin.
It's her cousin. It's her cousin,
yeah. It's actually Sparky from Speed Racer.
Yep.
He convinces her to do it. She doesn't tell the rest of the family. And there's this whole like subplot to where she has to like, she can't use her own name to go into the clinic to have it done. So she steals the identity of her friend, one of the people she works for, and her friend, who's played by Vanessa Kirby. And I don't understand why, and also that doesn't end up meaning anything.
Nothing.
Like the fact that she takes her friend's name, you think like, oh, okay. And there's even, like you said, when the Greys first appear, they go after her friend, right? And you're like, oh, I get it now. This is like a whole case of mistaken identity, except it doesn't end up being. Because once she goes to the clinic, even using her friend's name, the moment they like scan her DNA, they know it's her, and they immediately go after her. So like, Chris, what was the point? What was the point of Vanessa Kirby's character, and what was the point of the taking her friend's identity? Can you tell me?
You saw Vanessa Kirby in her lingerie, right?
Okay, that was the point, right?
Yeah, that was the only point.
Okay, yeah, because otherwise, just like I remember, like I was just thinking that, like, why do we even have that whole like tangent there? It meant nothing.
It meant nothing.
And it could have been fun, right? Like in a movie that if they gave us more thought, imagine if both her and her friend, who has nothing to do with this, ended up getting taken to space, right? And imagine how you play it for a little bit at the beginning where Channing Tatum doesn't know which of the two is the one he's supposed to be protecting. That's fun, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. This movie like suddenly is more interesting, but it ends up meaning nothing. It's just so weird.
And it's genuinely confusing. It's genuinely confusing when she's sitting in the clinic and she uses her friend's name, and then the Greys are there anyways. Yeah. It's genuinely confusing. I think I did pause it at that point, being like, wait a second.
Because then you're thinking, oh, is it actually that her friend is the one that they're coming? You know, that's what you're thinking. But it's not. It's her. It always is her. So yeah,
by the way, I love that idea of bringing Vanessa Kirby along for the ride. It's nice to always have that, the comedic. What am I trying to say? What am I trying to say?
Comic relief.
Comic relief. It's always nice to have the comic relief. And you said this earlier, that this movie lacks a sense of humor. And that's such a strange thing when you hire Channing Tatum on the peak 21 Jump Street career path.
My name is Jeff.
And it's just very strange. And maybe they thought this selling the eggs plot was funny. Maybe they thought it was funny. But in mine, I actually thought it was kind of loaded imagery. I thought it was a little weird, to say the least. But they play it for laughs because her cousin goes off and spends $10,000 preemptively, what they were gonna get from the egg sale. And there's this whole scene where he bought a TV and like an Xbox and all this other shit. And she's like, oh, I didn't get it done. And he's like, oh no, I spent all the money, and that doesn't go anywhere either.
Yeah. I'm just going to briefly mention the other thing about the first 10 or so minutes that throws me off, Chris, because you mentioned
maybe I didn't like the first 15 minutes.
Well, let me just say what my problem is here, right? And this again speaks to what I was talking about a structure issue. Now, I can't for sure say that my opinion here is like 100% right, but I will say I think where this movie makes a strategic misstep is after Mila Kunis's voiceover narration that starts the film, where she's providing the backstory of her family, right? So we see her mother meet her dad. They marry. He's unfortunately murdered in like a robbery gone wrong in their apartment or anything. So she's telling us this whole story, and then we get the title Jupiter Sending and setting up. Okay, she's the main character. We understand that. We understand her character's named Jupiter because that's what the dad wanted to name her. Great. And then you cut to space. You just cut to space, and we meet the three Abraxas siblings, and they're having this discussion about how over the course of the discussion you understand their mother just recently died. and now they're basically fighting over the will, essentially, right? Like who's been left Earth, and which one of them is going to get control of it. And we are led to understand Earth is very important for some reason, so they all seem to want it. Okay, why did I already see that? This is what just I couldn't believe. Like, shouldn't we have just stuck with Jupiter all the way until like the initial appearance of Channing Tatum with no indication of what the bigger plot? These movies always work better, right? When you have an identifier character, the person who's thrust into this world, and we are learning all of this through her eyes. But this movie like just jumps ahead and shows us the three antagonists, shows us that this is like a large bureaucratic galactic chase for Earth before she finds any of that out. That's just so strange to me. And I think like a very confident film and a movie that spends more time could pull it off. As we said, if this is a TV show, you could get away with that. But in a movie, I think it kind of, again, sinks it right away because we now know more about the main character. Yeah. Or we know more than her. And that's always, that's a problem, I think, sometimes. We should be discovering all this stuff with her. Do you agree with that? Like, that was also a weird thing, I felt.
Oh, absolutely. Because then you spend the whole movie wondering why Jupiter Jones is such an idiot. You know? Even though she doesn't know what we know. She doesn't know. We know. She knows. We knows. You know. Yeah.
No, you're right. It's unfair to her. It's unfair to the character because it makes us be frustrated with her when we shouldn't be.
Exactly.
But by our nature as viewers, we are because she's always playing catch up to us, and that's
There's moments in this that she's so obviously being misdirected and lied to, and I'm like screaming at my screen, being like, "Jupiter, you moron!" But then you have to like remind yourself that, oh yeah, she doesn't know this.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's frustrating.
Although performance-wise, also that doesn't help, right? So when you have like Titus being like, "Yeah, you should marry me, and trust me, I'm definitely going to stop the whole human harvesting thing," and she's like, "Okay," and you're like, "What?" Like, first of all, nothing about his pitch feels genuine, right? It's like it's so clearly like a lie. That whole sequence is,
and which is so stupid too, because again, going to her performance and an underwritten character, listeners. She is the supposed reincarnation of Titus's mother.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, Titus is asking his mother to marry him, and Jupiter not once says, "Ew."
Yeah.
That's all she needs to say.
Like nobody brings it up. Nobody talks about how weird that is. And if you're thinking, well, okay, so because the idea, and this is an interesting idea. This movie has a lot of interesting ideas, right? So the one of them is that idea that time has just been going on so long. This isn't like, it's not magical, right? She's not the magical reincarnation of the mother.
Yeah.
Instead, the idea is that time has just been going on so long, and so many people across the universe have been born that eventually there will just be like a double of you. Like the same kind of DNA strand will kind of pop up again. And that's what she represents. She is just the rebirth of the same DNA strand as their mother. That's actually kind of a cool idea. I like that it's not like mystical or anything.
Same. I agree.
Yeah. But to that end, as we were just saying, if you're thinking like, well, okay, maybe that's why it's not like, it doesn't matter that he wants to marry her. They don't really play into it. Oh no, they do. Because after that, once you get to Balaam, Eddie Redmayne, he like is so clearly treating her like she's his mother, right?
Yes.
His mother reborn. And so, yeah, there's like, why does he see her so much as the mother? But Titus is all like, well, I guess I want to marry and fuck my mother then. Yeah, I don't know. It's very strange. And then you have Khalik, who is, she kind of only exists here to give Jupiter some exposition early, to explain how this goo made of humans makes people young. By the way, you were mentioning earlier about how this movie definitely feels like their least personal film.
Yeah.
That's true to agree. I think it is funny how you can tell that maybe they had this edict to like create something, and they're like, I don't know, like let's just pull a bunch of our like greatest hits, because this is their third sci-fi film that is about humans being like harvested. Right?
Yeah.
That is what The Matrix is about, and that's also in Cloud Atlas. And then you get here and they're just like, yeah, we'll do that again, I guess. The bad people are trying to do something with humans. So humans were used as batteries in The Matrix, and in the future elements of the future segments of Cloud Atlas, they were being made into food. And now here they are being made into a goo that keeps people young. I don't know. What a weird fetish for the Wachowskis to just kind of keep coming back to this.
Yeah, I mean, if it works, it works. And if they get checks, then I guess that's all that matters. This one definitely felt like the paycheck movie, though. Again, I really want to hammer that home. It even seems like they're bored, and maybe that's why the movie is boring, honestly.
Well, yeah, because that even speaks to so I want to ask you, Chris, do you agree with me? And this is the most surprising thing to me coming from the Wachowskis. the action is boring. Like, the action sequences are not that exciting.
I would say that is true for 95% of the movie. This is where the movie peaks for me. Not a high peak, obviously. More like a rolling hill. But this is right after Kane saves Jupiter from the Greys. They go on this mad chase through the city, and we haven't really even touched on this, but Channing Tatum Kane has like these cool hover boots, but they act like rollerblades almost, and you kind of can skate through the sky. It's pretty cool because it's done like mostly practically, and it really sells it. It really feels like it's practical. It feels like this technology can exist. Most of it is Channing Tatum doing the stunt, which you can see, which I love. But there's this big chase around the city, which I did find quite exciting. I thought it was really well done, looked awesome, gave me something I've never seen before. Like it just did. It just gave me something I've never seen before. I liked it, and they even invented, as the Wachowskis are known to do, they don't like to repeat themselves. So for this specific stunt, it was the longest sequence in the whole film, and it took 6 months to do. Mila Kunis and Channing Tatum were on set every day for 6 months for this one scene.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, by the way. Which is absolutely insane.
I wonder about that. That must mean that like every day of filming, they just had to film at least one little chunk of it, right? That's got to be what that means. Yeah.
Because what do they say? Well, what's the kind of the rule of thumb in action scenes? They get maybe a minute a day for an action scene. That's about the rule of thumb. So they created a rig of 6 cameras called the Panocam, which was mounted on a helicopter and covered nearly 180 degrees of the action. During post-production, the directors could combine the overlapped film footage, essentially creating a camera that could swing around the action independently of the helicopter's actual flying path. This technique was taken for a bunch more films after that. But again, the Wachowskis, a little bit of vision, even in this, garbage, there's a little bit of vision that they are innovators. They are visionaries of some type. So as they do with The Matrix and Bullet Time, there's something cool here. Not on the level of Bullet Time, obviously, but I do respect seeing a lack of CGI doubles. CGI doubles are such a fucking pain in my ass. Speaking of Eternals, CGI doubles are so horrific. They cannot get that down pat, and this one I think I appreciated the practicality, maybe a little bit more than maybe is given credit, but
I don't disagree with anything you just said. I will say that's not where the movie peaks for me. I'll talk about that in a moment. Okay. I get it. Like
I guess I did mention the lingerie scene, so yeah.
No, it's I don't know that whole 8-minute sequence. I look at it and I can look at it and understand it's like a technically impressive sequence.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to admit, like, it doesn't do much for me. Like, even that sequence, when I compare that to, like, the action sequences from the Matrix trilogy or, like, Speed Racer, which we talked about last time.
Sure.
There's nothing in that moment. And you know what I think it is? I think it's that I don't care about Kane and Jupiter. I think that is the problem. I don't have, like, an emotional connection to it. So it is just kind of, like, things happening on screen. And yeah, it's, like, well shot and there's some cool visuals. But I don't know. It doesn't speak to me.
That's a good point. I can't disagree with that.
I'll tell you the moment where the movie peaks for me, and this probably won't surprise you, Chris. I would imagine you would watch this movie and go like, "Oh, I bet Trevor likes that." And as I say that, you might even be guessing, because I mentioned earlier how I think this movie is missing a sense of humor. To me,
I know exactly what this is.
Yes, the moment where the film comes to life is with probably the best character in the film, and that is intergalactic advocate Bob. Played by Samuel Barnett, who he played Dirk Gently in the Dirk Gently TV series a few years ago. So as I've a couple times so far I've used the word bureaucracy. So we should mention, first of all, just to clarify, so Kane Wise, the soldier who is sent to Earth to protect her, he is sent he's been hired by Titus to come and grab her. And this is because the 3 Abraxas siblings are basically working against each other. They all want Earth, essentially, and so they're all trying to make sure they get their hands on Jupiter and to use her. And as I said, Titus's goal, Titus is like the young hip playboy one. We see him sleeping with multiple women. He's kind of this, like, he doesn't take anything too seriously. So he's going to marry her and then murder her and lay claim to Earth. So he hires Kane, doesn't tell Kane all that, of course, just says, "Get this one for me," and that's the plan. So once they bring her up into space and they find out, and she finds out the whole story about how she is genetically the ruler of Earth, there's this really interesting sequence where it's revealed that she first has to get all the paperwork signed off on that. And this is where you go like, I want more of this. This is where the movie comes to life for me. There's this amazing sequence where she meets this character. It's a robot called Intergalactic Advocate Bob. And he's the guy that takes her to basically like the space government buildings and says, okay, we have to go get all of like, you know, all the T's crossed and the I's dotted. We got to get all the paperwork. And it turns into this like quite lengthy montage of how insane the bureaucracy is, but how even in space, it's kind of like going to the DMV here or something. Right? Everywhere you go, they tell you, oh, no, you have to get Form B. This is Form C. And then like, well, then you go to get Form C, and they're like, well, you can't get Form C unless you have Form B. And you're like, I just had Form B. And it kind of goes on, and it's very, very funny. And as you're watching it, this is what's clever about this sequence too. It's a little, maybe it's too on the nose, but whatever, I like it. You're watching this sequence, and you're just, if you know this movie, you're going, oh, this is Brazil. This is like so clearly they're doing Brazil here. I'm getting such a Brazil vibe. And then the seal and signet minister, who's the last person they meet, is played by Terry Gilliam. And it's like, oh, perfect. So they got the director of Brazil to come in, and it's such a wink and a nod, but it's so perfect. But it also, boy, is that sequence detached from the rest of the movie.
Oh, big time.
Right?
Oh,
like
big
that's
time.
the thing, and it's like it's so funny and it's so whimsical, and nothing else in the movie is like that. And even I really like, you were talking about Channing Tatum's like comic timing. I don't know if you're like kind of clocking him, Chris, because during that whole sequence he's always standing behind her. But like, if you ever watch this movie again, which you probably won't, but who knows, just look at him during that whole sequence. He's doing a nice, like, subtle comedic job of, he's just getting so frustrated with this because, you know, he's a warrior, and now here he is in this like bureaucratic like nightmare. So he's playing it pretty well, and I like how Intergalactic Bob, as he gets more and more frustrated, he's like starting to like steam is coming out of his head and stuff. Yeah. That's all pretty funny. So I like that part. I wish the movie had more of that.
Yeah, the movie just lacks personality, and I think that scene has the most personality for sure. Yeah. But like you said, it feels so detached that I bet people that are watching this bland, boring movie, when it gets to that point, they might even feel so detached at that point to be like, oh, okay, I'm just done with this movie. You know what I mean? Like, I think people like us, you know, are a little bit more film dorks. You know what I mean? Like, we appreciate scenes like that, but I think even the general audience at that point might be even more so like, oh, okay, what is this now?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
No, I totally agree. I think, like, as you said, so for film dorks, we maybe come to life for a brief moment because we're like, oh, it's like Brazil. That's a better movie. I'm thinking of that now, you know? But also, the problem here is, I think we talked about this in the Speed Racer episode. I'm pretty sure we did. We talked about, like tonal balance, right? And how the Wachowskis have no problem having like multiple tones in one film, which Speed Racer is a masterpiece of. That I love movies like that. I mentioned this last time. I love Sam Raimi, who also does this. The Wachowskis have done it. There's other filmmakers who are very, very... Tarantino is good at this, like multiple tones in one film. But you have to be consistent with that to where the movie has to kind of be constantly bouncing around from tones. You can't have a movie that's dour 95% of the time and then one sequence that is suddenly very, very satirical and goofy. That's the problem. If this had multiple sequences like that, you'd be able to get into that vibe. The problem is this whole Terry Gilliam sequence comes about halfway through a very long film, and then there's nothing else like it afterwards. I can see why an audience would just be like, what was that? Like, what the hell is that doing in there? Yeah.
That's how I feel. What was that? Every time Eddie Redmayne's on screen.
Double our security deployment to destroy any ship that comes near the planet.
Yeah. Let's get into it.
I don't know if I think insufferable and just plain awful. Mm-hmm. It's so bad, and I don't know if it's trying to be intentionally chewing the scenery, a la Fifth Element, or is he just flat out atrocious and should have been fired?
It is one. I was just looking my original Letterboxd review of this from years ago. I said Eddie Redmayne. I mean, I don't even know what to say about what Redmayne is doing here. It's either brilliant or idiotic, maybe both. I don't know. And I think on a second viewing, I'm leaning more towards idiotic, just because he's definitely making a choice, right? So you did your little impression of it earlier. So he gives most of his lines in this whispered voice where it sounds like he's struggling to talk. And we learned that that's actually because Kane had like bitten his throat out at some point in the past.
Right.
So that's why he speaks like that. And then like I guess what's supposed to be the interesting element of it is like he usually talks like this, but then sometimes he'll get very animated, and it's like you're right that I think he's going for a Gary Oldman and Fifth Element kind of thing, but it's just not working. It's more aggravating than it is entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, every time he's on, you're like laughing at it, but not in the right way.
My mother taught me what was necessary to rule in this universe.
Like killing people?
I create life!
You're not laughing at him the way you laugh at Zorg. It's totally different. You're just like, what? It's bad.
It's
bad.
not even laughing at it. It's like secondhand embarrassment.
Yeah, it is. It's embarrassing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, and a reminder, listeners, this was the same year that he was nominated and eventually won for Theory of Everything, playing Stephen Hawking, which also I think is not that good of a performance, but okay.
I agree.
Yeah, dude is not good in this. And it's funny because, Mila Kunis is definitely, I think, the weakest link of the whole film, or her character especially. But Eddie Redmayne does not do anyone any favors.
How dare you!
Yeah, like the way I would kind of consider this, and I don't know if you would agree, but I think Mila Kunis is still the weakest link because she's kind of like not even trying anything.
Yeah.
Like the only thing I can say for Eddie Redmayne is he's trying something.
You begged me to do it!
And I'm always pro that. I think just unfortunately what he's trying is not working well.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, at least he was trying something. Not that it didn't turn out very great.
No.
Chris, by the way, really quickly before we go on, I just want to point out, I hate to derail this, but I was just looking at IMDb trivia for this film, and it says that before they cast Mila Kunis after Natalie Portman dropped out, you know who almost got the role? Rooney Mara.
Oh no!
we cannot get away from Rooney Mara.
Maybe that's where Mila Kunis got her lessons from.
Maybe, yeah. That was her. They didn't hire her as the actor, but she was the acting coach.
Man, if Rooney Mara was in this movie, we would have ended up like when you watch The Ring, and then 7 days later you're found in a closet and you look like that.
We would have looked like Amber Tamblyn, like in the closet.
Yeah.
Structure-wise, another thing, because we brought up Eddie Redmayne. There's this moment in this film, and I know I wonder if you had the same thought watching it again, where I was definitely reminded of John Carter, because we have a forced wedding, right? And in John Carter, that is the climax of the film. And this is what I mean about how this movie is so messed up, and this is why Eddie Redmayne is like doubly annoying in this, because you feel like the movie should already be done by the time we get to him. It's pretty clear at the beginning he's going to be the main villain. But this is so Chris and I have already alluded to how this should be a season of a show or like multiple seasons. About halfway through the movie, or maybe like a little past the halfway point, we get this like whole sequence where where Titus gets his hands on Jupiter and tricks her into marrying him. And we get that traditional thing. It plays out exactly like it does in John Carter, where there's a giant wedding ceremony. She's put in this like very, very fancy future dress. They go to have this like galactic wedding, and then Kane has to come break up the wedding and save her. And in 90% of movies like this, that would be the climax of the film. And as you watch this movie, it feels like it should be. It's so big, it's so like kind of, it feels like so climactic that everything that follows it feels deflated. You're like, wasn't that the ending? And that should be right. So that's why I said, like, this movie should have been about that, and then a sequel should have been about now Balaam coming in and making his play.
Totally.
And the fact that the main villain is just kind of then said, like, he's like pretty much we now she knows who she is. She survived this one kind of attempt on her life. She got out of it. She's in control of Earth. Oh, but she's got this other brother to deal with. It makes Balaam feel like an afterthought. So you have a bad performance from Eddie Redmayne, and the movie's not doing him any favors because he feels like another thing tacked on at the end. So this is what I mean, how the structure is like all off in this movie.
He's oddly billed as the main villain, but he becomes the secondary, tertiary villain. You know, it's it's weird because even Khalik, the female, like the sister, she disappears from the movie entirely.
Yes.
And it's weird because she's giving a performance that is a little bit like, do I trust her? Do I not trust her? But ultimately, like, as you're saying, if there was maybe a sequel or another season of television, she could maybe even, kind of join forces, being like, maybe I do have to take down my family. You know what I mean? And then it all leads and crescendos going against Balaam. But nope, this movie needs to cram everything in by the credits. Not great. It's just a snooze fest. I have to say, it just becomes a tedious snooze fest.
Tedious is a great word for it. This is a rough one because I wanted to I've already talked about some of the things I like. We should say
the design work is awesome.
Design work is awesome.
The ships, the colors, the costumes, the makeup.
Know what they're doing with visuals.
Totally.
I mean, if you put this movie on and turn the soundtrack off and play some of your favorite albums, this movie's pretty great to look at. There's some incredible stuff going on. It's all attractive people. As you're just saying, the costumes are cool. Some of the aliens are very cool looking. I love the dragon dude, the kind of the humanoid dragon. And I do love how I always love it in sci-fi where they're just kind of this future world is just so accepted. So all these people are we have these crossbreed people. Gugu Mbatha Raw shows up as a half human, half deer. She looks really cool with the big deer ears. And I like her in general. She doesn't she does barely anything in this, but it's cool to see her for a moment.
I like the owl guy.
Yeah, the owl guy's
awesome. That was cool.
Yeah. It's a great film to look at, and even if I said the action sequences weren't doing much to me, at least there's some cool elements to that. Duna Bay from Cloud Atlas and the host, she's one of the bounty hunters chasing them in the Chicago action sequence, and it's pretty cool how she has that flying motorcycle that has the gun that floats next to it.
No, I just want to interject about those mercenary guys, those bounty hunters, because how cool do they look? And they are absolutely nothing characters.
Yeah, I know.
What a fucking bummer. As soon as they show up, they look so unique, so cool, different, just goofy and weird. And does she even have a line?
I don't remember. Not that it occurs to me, no.
Yeah, it's a frustrating experience. But yeah, sorry to step on your toes there. I just needed to jump in because I genuinely like that idea, and then they just fucking disappear and they have nothing to say. But anyway.
But hey, if nothing else, this movie does teach us that honeybees recognize galactic royalty.
By the way, because they don't sting her. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Trev, guess what? I've never been stung by a bee. So you know what?
Holy shit.
Bow bitch. Anyway.
This means that you're going to have Eddie Redmayne coming from you. So good luck with that. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's why even the bee thing, right? There's a lot of cool little clever ideas in this. Right? So there's I'm not opposed to that idea. I think that's kind of neat, right? The fact that the bees hover around her, and when Sean Bean kneels to her and says my majesty, and he says bees recognize royalty and they recognize queens. I'm like, oh, that's kind of clever.
Yeah.
And there's some interesting, this whole idea, which we've talked about, but we haven't got too much into detail because whatever. But the ultimate idea that Earth it's just a long project. I think that's actually kind of interesting. It's not too dissimilar from the Matrix, but to that revelation to say, all these millennia, right? All these millennia have just been building. What this family does is they'll go create a planet. They'll put the first little organisms on it, and they'll say, okay, well, we're gonna keep living forever because of what we're doing. We'll come back in millions of years, and once you've hit the right population level, we kill all you and make this juice out of you. That's pretty cool. That's pretty clever, right? I thought that was neat, and so that's what I mean. I kind of would like to see this fully expanded into a TV show where you could actually play all these characters, and then you just need to make a better version of Jupiter and a better version of Cain. We haven't even talked about Channing Tatum's performance. We should say his performance was actually legit hampered by the fact that he had to wear a mouthpiece to shape his jaw for this because they wanted him to look more canine. And he's talked about how that actually prevented him from closing his mouth and made it kind of difficult to speak. So maybe he just couldn't be as naturally charismatic. But yeah, he's also just kind of boring in this. I mean, whenever he's got his shirt off and stuff, you're like, oh, I get it. I get why he's the action guy in this. Yeah. And I think he looks kind of cool, but yeah, not very compelling either.
No, and he looks cool, and that's about it. Because Trev, did you buy the romance?
Oh no, not at all.
Isn't it one of the worst romances you've seen in a movie like this? It's something that it's almost doing a romantic thing, a romantic angle, because movies like this need a romance.
Yeah,
it has nothing to do with the characters. It's just the Wachowskis being like, oh, they have to like each other. They have to love each other. Not like, they have to love each other.
Well, but to be fair, she does love dogs.
You are royalty now. I'm a splice. You don't understand what that means, but I have more in common with a dog than I have with you.
I love dogs. I've always loved dogs.
I should go, Your Majesty.
Right.
You need to strap in before we portal.
Right, okay. I love dogs.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels like an afterthought. It's very much this movie feels like a YA kind of movie, even though it's not. So like the romance is two attractive people, they see each other, they're gonna fall for each other, but you just know it as soon as they show up. It would have been more interesting to like subvert that, I suppose, and have the romance be with a different character. I don't know, have Mila Kunis hook up with Sean Bean. I don't know what who cares, right? Also Stinger. Oh God, you know what? I can't believe I'm so stupid. For the first time as I said that, it hit me that his name is Stinger.
That's hilarious.
Human and bee. Like, that didn't even occur to me until just now, and now I hate myself and the movie even more.
I realized it about half an hour ago. And I thought that you figured it out, but I like that it happened just now. We realized that in real time.
Yeah. Why? What's the deal with him? What's the deal with his daughter? Like, why does he have this like daughter on Earth? Again, another thing that's like brought up. It seems like it is meant to be important. Kind of goes nowhere, right?
They need a reason why he is like a double, triple agent, right? They're holding his daughter, I'm assuming, or something like they've threatened to kill her. But again, it's there's just too much. Like, again, we can probably talk for another half hour, 45 minutes about all the little things in this movie. There's just too much. It's too complex, it's too complicated, and it's overly complicated because you simplified the story of aliens harvesting a planet for some like, L'Oreal, fucking face cream. Like, that's what they're doing. And that's all I need to know. But this movie is just bogged down constantly by exposition. Constantly. So hopefully this episode isn't as boring as the movie, but it's just it's constant. I don't know.
Maybe they're born with it. Maybe it's liquefied human beings.
I gotta give you a little bit there. That was very good. That was very good. That was a layup and a dunk. I love it. I love it. Okay, we gotta talk a little bit score horror.
We do, I think.
Okay, there's a little bit more to say about score horror, but just in the sense like, okay, so it's Michael Giacchino. He worked with the Wachowskis on Speed Racer, which back in that episode we talk about how amazing that score is. Weirdly, though, the way that they recorded the score for this movie was while they were in like kind of during production. So usually a score is written near the end of production or at the exact last moment of production. But here, Giacchino got freedom to just do whatever he wants, and they were going to tack on the score later. So he said that it gave him a lot of more freedom, and it was fun to be not locked down by things.
It was their second time doing that because they had just done that on Cloud Atlas as well.
Correct.
Yep. So
I got to ask you, how do you feel about this music?
I think it's good. I think Giacchino is pretty reliable. I will say for me, this is a score. I think you and I have talked about this before with other scores. It's a score that almost works better independent of the movie.
Yes.
I've sat down and listened to the score on its own, and it's very good background reading sci-fi music.
Yes.
It never is like, maybe that. I think that's just a testament again to the movie, like the faults of the movie. Is I'm never excited by the score while I'm watching it, and then I listen to it independently and I go, oh, actually this is pretty good. Yes. So this isn't like my favorite Giacchino score by any means, but it's not a bad score. It's just maybe it's because he made this awesome score and then they kind of try to retrofit it to the movie, and I think because the movie's just not really clicking, that the music has nothing to like latch on to. So yeah, it's good, but you wouldn't realize how good it was by watching the film, oddly enough.
Yeah, we're simpatico on this because I felt the exact same way while I was watching it. I was actually like, "Ooh, man, this is like lower tier Giacchino for me." And then actually today, I decided I should probably listen to some of it on its own because I had a feeling I had a feeling that it would be better by itself. And yeah, it is miles ahead on its own. But like you said, it's still just kind of run of the mill. It's solid. It's a solid score, which is very strange that this solid, okay, read sci-fi novel score, background music score, inspired a ballet.
Yeah.
In 2018, the production is titled A Dark and Lonely Space and was specifically inspired by Giacchino's score. It was a cast of 24, a chorus of 60, a 5-part ballet, and it aimed to anthropomorphize the birth of a planetary system. Yep.
Yeah, the Pacific Northwest Ballet put it on. And it was a dancer named Kyle Davis who kind of listened to the score and said, I want to make this like ballet about planets and the forces of physics and celestial bodies. That's weird. I'm not the biggest ballet guy. I would definitely check that out just because the music is cool. I'd also be curious to see, is that ballet that is just people dancing around this music and pretending to be planets and celestial bodies, does that tell a better story than Jupiter Ascending? I would not be shocked if that is the case.
Yeah.
Don't know if it has any half men, half dogs, though.
It's true. Maybe Channing Tatum will make an appearance. Maybe he did.
My name is Jeff.
What other? Do you think? I wonder what other. Should there be like a Speed Racer ballet? Should there be? There definitely should be a Matrix ballet. I'll tell you that.
Which one? Reloaded or Revolutions? Can't do the first.
No, just Animatrix.
Nice. The Second Reckoning, Part 1.
Yeah,
that was deep cut, by the way. That was very deep cut.
The ballet community definitely not like losing out by not adapting all the Wachowski's works.
Yeah. So, it's funny you're saying adapting the Wachowski's works. Well, again, the Wachowskis are very ambitious. We can't say enough about their originality, and they do swing for the fences. And like you said earlier, this was a big swing and quite a miss. But again, I always like hearing what they say, because I don't know if you remember this, but remember when the Wachowskis were like a mystery?
Yeah, they wouldn't wouldn't say anything about the Matrix initially. Yeah,
there was no pictures of them. There was like nothing. They were totally like just in the background. And I remember there was a game. What was it called? I think it was for PS2. I think it was called The Path of Neo. And The Path of Neo, you play as Neo through the Matrix films. And it ends, and then it shows 2 8-bit versions of the Wachowskis sitting in chairs, and they speak to you as the gamer, as the player, and they tell you all the themes of the Matrix. And it was the first time that I've ever heard. That was the first time I think anybody had ever heard them speak, was like on camera in some way. So it's interesting when Lana, especially, talks about the industry, and she has a little thing to say here. The last 15 years have all been about derivative material and things we keep rebooting again and again, like children with bedtime stories. When we were young, it was people like Gene Siskel driving us, saying, "Why should I see a movie based on a book? I know what's going to happen." Now that has shifted to, "Why should I see something not based on something I might already know?" You've got to do something like that to get my attention if you want me to turn away from my video games and TV, and even those options are being overrun by derivative content right now. There's something to be said there. Like, she's, again, not wrong. She has a great insight into the industry, and we've talked about that in the past as well on many of these episodes. Hell, we talked about it in Speed Racer, because that was really, in my opinion, I think that was them, well, in your opinion probably too, that was them talking shit about the industry and direction by committee and producers and money and all that, and it was all about art.
This is absolutely what I love about the Wachowskis. I mean, she's dead on, right? That, like, look, you and I are on record as we enjoy Star Wars, we enjoy the MCU, but originality, it's still what we seek. We still wish there was more of it, and the Wachowskis are always shooting for that. And that's the thing, is like, you could say, well, but Speed Racer was a cartoon that already existed. Yeah, but look at the way they did it. Look at the way they approached Speed Racer. That's where the originality comes from. Oh, Cloud Atlas was a book. It was a book nobody thought could be adapted into a movie. And they did this like crazy, super ambitious adaptation of it that obviously doesn't work for everyone. I love it. But even the fact of them working with another filmmaker and saying, we'll direct half, you direct half. So they approach it in a unique way. this movie, this is Lana's on record as saying that this is inspired by The Odyssey and The Wizard of Oz. In fact, she talks about where the Wizard of Oz connection comes from, and she says, "We were like, can we bring a different kind of female character like Dorothy or Alice, obviously from Alice in Wonderland, characters who negotiate conflict in complex situations with intelligence and empathy. Dorothy has a protector, Toto, who's always barking at everyone, and that was sort of the origin of Cain." So, like, the fact that they look at The Wizard of Oz and say, well, we can do a version of that, but we'll turn it into this, like, crazy, gigantic space opera. They're still original even when they're bringing in outside influences. And that's what's cool about them. And just because I want to address this, because I'm sure someone listening might have, because I've already had to talk about this with other people who have said, well, but why is Lana just going back to the Matrix now then, with Matrix Resurrections? Is that them throwing it in? Is that them throwing in the towel and just going back to the easy paycheck? I don't know if you've seen this quote, Chris, but
I did. I'm very glad you're bringing it up, by the way, because I love this.
It's like beautiful, right? So Lana, as we know, it's only Lana coming back because Lily decided to just kind of stay away from this one. But Lana defended this decision to go back to the Matrix, and this is, it's not a cash-in. Lana had this to say: "My dad died, then a friend died, then my mom died. I didn't really know how to process that kind of grief. I hadn't experienced it that closely. Their lives are going to end, and yet still hit really hard. My brain has always reached into my imagination, and one night I was crying, and I couldn't sleep, and my brain exploded this whole story. And I couldn't have my mom and dad, yet suddenly I had Neo and Trinity, arguably the two most important characters in my life. It was immediately comforting to have those two characters alive again, and it's super simple. You can look at it and say, okay, these two people die, and okay, bring these two people back to life, and oh, doesn't that feel good? Yeah, it did. It's simple, and this is what art does, and that's what stories do. They comfort us." If you can hear that quote and still be cynical and still shit on her wanting to do another Matrix movie, get out of town, because that so speaks to, and again, we're talking about what stories do. We talked last time on Speed Racer, this optimistic idea. We definitely still need, you and I just have how this film doesn't quite work for us, but man, we need filmmakers like the Wachowskis, who are trying to make movies that are original and also speaking to the better elements of humanity, this like need for connection. And that is one thing, as like this movie might not hit the mark, but it is ultimately saying it is about this young girl who feels like she means nothing in the world, finds out she is the ruler of Earth, and decides to rule Earth with complete compassion, but also not position herself as a ruler. Mm-hmm. That is kind of cool too. That's another element I do like. Right at the end, she's like, okay, I'm the ruler of Earth, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to my simple life. I'm going to keep working as a maid. I'm not going to hover my power over anyone. So that is the kind of character you get in a Wachowski movie and not necessarily other films. And that's what I like about what they're aiming for, even when it's not always working.
And she goes back to that life thankful. Like there's a little bit of animosity for her life in the beginning of the film, but she goes back and she realizes what she had, and it is about her family, and it is about, the important, it's about the little things, even though now she's ruling Earth. So there's the glimpses of personal, and with the Matrix Resurrections, it is absolutely a personal story. So again, we're on record. We are incredibly excited about that movie. I am on full lockdown, as I said on Speed Racer. I am on the level of excitement for that movie, quite possibly like I was for Force Awakens. So, I'm hearing that quote again. It just gives you all the feels, and it's very much this is a filmmaker that I want to keep watching, and I am just fucking so excited that she's able to return to the world. And I'm really not cynical about this one.
No, yeah, I can't wait to watch it on my phone and then immediately text you how it ends.
You son of a bitch.
So, Chris, as we start wrapping this one up, let me just ask you, if this had hit, right? If people had kind of connected to it, what would you want to see in sequels, or would you be down for sequels? Because my answer to this is maybe what you would echo. Instead of saying like, yeah, I wish there were sequels, it's more just as we've been alluding to. I just wish this one had been kind of expanded into 3 films instead of 1. Like that's really I think there's enough here for like an entire trilogy of movies.
Agreed. And if they did do a sequel, I definitely think at least we have Khalik still. Like the sister involved, so I think there is something.
And not really. As you said, it's a detriment to this film, but I guess it would have been good for any follow-ups. We still don't really understand her motivations.
Exactly.
We don't get that character yet.
So I think there's something to tap there for sure. Stupid. Whoa. And also recast Mila Kunis.
Yeah, that's probably important. Yeah.
So yeah, that is 2015's Jupiter Ascending. Now, if you fellow listeners, new and old, we love our themes. We love our themes, and by the way, Trev hates when I name them. Okay.
I just said I don't want us to get too locked into it. That's all I said.
I know, but this one's a good one because Trev had this great idea that for Christmas we should gift each other movies to watch. That there is no veto. I cannot say no. He cannot say no. But we were going to gift each other a film where I am going to call the month Failure to Franchise with Trev and Chris Tmas.
I don't like how close you're trying to connect your name to Christ in that. But
I am. It does mean Christ bearer.
So I guess I'll roll with it.
So
yes,
Trev,
the idea here was we alluded to before. We have a list of over 200 films for this podcast, and we try to think of like different themes. We try to come up with what are we going to do next. And I just said to Chris, how about we have a month where we both pick a movie that we would like to do, but we don't think would necessarily come up anytime soon, and we might feel like the other person's not super jazzed about it, or whatever the case might be. So I get a pick, you get a pick, and as you said, there's no veto power here.
So Trev, I got you a gift. Do you see it? Do you see it in front of you?
Oh wait, am I doing a bit here?
Yeah, we're doing a bit. Remember I told you I was going to say I might keep this in because you didn't listen to my texts.
Hey, by the way, you don't listen to texts, you read them. You stupid idiot.
God damn it.
But yes, Chris, I do have this amazing present in front of me.
Okay, all right. Go ahead and tear that sucker open.
You're not one of those assholes who like, I'm going to unwrap it and there's like another layer of wrapping.
Don't bury the lead.
All right.
Okay, you got it. Okay.
What do we got here?
All right, we have, and there's reasons why I've gifted you this. We have 2013's Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters.
Ooh, okay.
Okay, so I have two reasons for this. Number one, it's mercifully short.
Okay.
It's 88 minutes long, and I thought, I love you, and I wanted to make sure that you are you get a nice so you get less time with me during the holiday season.
You know what? Thank you. That is the best gift you could
give me. Yes, I thought so. Yeah. Plus, the Disney Plus show Hawkeye is premiering in December. So I thought, you know what? Let's try to get those sweet SEOs. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Well, I'm not one to not return a favor. So, Chris, I as well have given you a present.
Okay, I see it here. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Why don't you go ahead and unwrap that bad boy?
Okay, all right. Lots of bubble wrap.
Yes, yeah. I like to protect my gifts.
Good. Oh, okay. What is this?
Okay, this is 1995's Tank Girl.
Excellent.
So let me explain why I thought it would be fun to watch Tank Girl. Honestly, one of the biggest reasons is this is just a movie I've been kind of dying personally to revisit. So I thought, you know what? I want to revisit this a lot. It's been a very long time since I've seen it. Why don't I get my good buddy Chris to come along with me on this journey, which I believe this will be a first-time watch for you.
It will be.
Yes, and I think, we like doing some of these like kind of crazier comic book films. This is also a movie that has very recently been, the rights to it have been sold to Margot Robbie, who's apparently developing her own version of this. Who knows if that'll go anywhere? Many of these things never do.
Right.
But she's obviously likes this character. She's trying to do something with it. It's just a very, very crazy 1990s comic book film, very indicative of a different era, which I know you and I are kind of fascinated by. And since I wanted to revisit it, I thought this might be a fun one to take a look at.
Awesome. Okay, now I'm very excited to look at that one.
Yeah.
I almost watched it last year before you had to.
I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad this can be your first experience with it.
Cool. Excellent. Well, listeners, if you want to follow along for Failure to Franchise with Trev and Christmas, we are on Twitter at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2 FPod. That's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that fun stuff. Like us there, like us everywhere. Also, please rate, review, whatever you do. Give us a star rating if you don't mind on your podcast app. That'd be awesome. And join the tribe and hit that subscribe. Then you'll keep up with us on the bi-weekly schedule, as we like to do things. So yeah, this is cool. This was a great idea. This might be a regular December thing. So I like it a lot. So yeah, kudos to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Not kudos to this movie though.
No kudos there. But
no Kunis dose. I might edit that out because I just pimped the whole podcast and people are literally deleting. They're throwing their phones out the window.
I know, but look, we promise. Chris saves those terrible ones for the very end. You can deal with it.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But we still love you, Wachowskis.
Yes.
Everybody's got their off days. I don't, but everybody else does.
I'm adding crickets right here. Okay, thanks for listening.
Yeah.